Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Experiential Marketing Summit Spring Edition. My name is Bianca Dux, the Event Content Manager here at Event Marketer. I'd like to thank you all for being here with us today, and if you're catching this on demand in the future, hello. If you've been with us so far, you know what to do. Be sure to engage in the chat located here in Swapcard and share your questions for the speakers. We have a very exciting panel here today that is ready to share how educational content and experiences are a core part of their experiential marketing strategy and how they measure and optimize these experiences. I'd like to give a very special thank you and welcome to our friends at AnyRoad for supporting this EMS and bringing this session to you all. Please give a warm welcome to Lauren Snyder, Vice President of Customer Success at AnyRoad. Lauren, hello, and thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Bianca. I really appreciate the warm welcome and the intro. As Bianca mentioned, my name is Lauren, and I am the Vice President of Customer Success at AnyRoad. And for those of you who are not familiar with AnyRoad, we empower brands to run virtual, hybrid, and in-person experiences and measure the impact of these experiences and their ROI at scale. In today's conversation, as Bianca mentioned, we're going to talk about how brands use classes and educational content to create loyalty. But before we dive in, I'd like to let our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit more about the types of experiences that they offer. And we're going to get started actually with Raquel. Raquel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Lauren. Hi, everyone. I'm Raquel Joseph. I also go by Rocky. I'm Chief Experience Officer at Kindred. You can find us at kindredmembers.com. And I work with corporate and nonprofit leaders to gain deeper connectivity and more confidence in environmental, social, and governance issues, because those issues are becoming more and more critical to both successful leadership and organizational success. We deliver coaching and all different types of educational formats. Really looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Raquel. Next up is Jen Harness.
Hey everyone, I'm Jen Harness, the Director of Content and Experience at Michael's Stores. So one of the things that we have been really working on this last year is the experience online, something that we launched new with the help of AnyRoad, and really just bringing the makers together and allowing them to utilize tools for free.
Great, thanks, Jen. I'm sure we'll talk more about that switch to online in a minute. But before we do, Natalie.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm so happy to be here today. Natalie Brown, and I run brand marketing, the go-to-market team, and the creative team over at Surlet Hub. And for those of you who've never heard of Surlet Hub before, we are a kitchenware retailer, but what sets us apart and makes us different is that we also run cooking schools. So we have them in our stores, we have in-person cooking classes, and then similar to Jen and the folks over at Michael's, last year we rolled out an online cooking class format too. So a very rich set of experiences that we offer to our customers.
Great, thank you. And I'd love to hear a little bit more. I think that actually segues into our first question, which is about the trends that you've seen in educational experiences that have emerged in the last year. So Natalie, maybe share a little bit about the trends, touch on how you've incorporated online, and what else have you seen?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen across the board a move to online, obviously. Our lives became a round of Zoom meetings, but I saw sort of a broadening. So just in general in the marketplace, I think I saw more light educational experiences be offered up, both as a way for companies to connect with customers as well as prospective customers, especially in the B2B space. I don't know if the rest of you have also been invited to like cocktail hours and flower arranging classes. So this idea of engaging around an educational experience has been leveraged to kind of still keep people together and keep people connected and find ways for B2B marketers to still be out there speaking to prospective customers, keeping leads warm, those kind of things. For us at Surlet Hub, obviously we transitioned to an online experience. And so for us, that was about learning how to teach a class in an online environment. It's very different. And then what types of content work. Again, very different being an online class. So you have to experiment and figure out the types of content that work. And so I think the trends that I saw those for us as well was around testing and figuring out formats and just the content types that work best with your customers.
I'll chime in and say something Natalie said rings very true for what we did. And that's the whole idea around testing and learning, and having an online, forum allowed us to make very quick strides in understanding what our customer was looking for. So we were, the lift is lighter, and we were able to really learn and try lots of things at once. So when we are able to go back to an in-person experience, we're going to be able to walk back in with a whole bunch of knowledge that we really didn't have before. And also stuff that I think can be enhanced by having an online component, the things that you can do both in-store and online to really make it a more fit the need of the maker type experience in the end.
Yeah, I would say the pivot to online that we all embraced, it's come up for each of you, was also really true for Kindred as well. But Kindred pivoted from an in-person events business to an online community. And so we had a double pivot of sort, and we really capitalize on a couple of trends, which is, I think, the embrace of original content. When we're looking at educational work, I think, folks like Sir Latab and Michael's are both well positioned because it's original cooking, original crafting, not just licensing someone else's content that people can access in other places. And that's what we do here at Kindred as well. We really invested in developing original frameworks and facilitation approaches, and will continue to do so. There's also been a huge uptake in engagement in social good, which we were able to really tap into. We offer a chance to make social good a part of daily leadership and daily life. And I think that you can see that in a lot of experiences out there. Like, I noticed that some of the classes I've seen have really been focused on a social good component, whether it's doing volunteering, whether it's nonprofit fundraisers online as part of community engagement, which I've really enjoyed. And then lastly, we certainly tapped into the subscription model piece. People are wanting to get always on access to what they want, what they need on a timely basis, high value for like a fair price. And we've also been able to use that type of model, that membership model, to tap into loyalty and do that with like a timely cadence, and also bringing in contributors that are spectacular. Like, we have folks that I'm so privileged to work with that are doing this education. And of course, we want to find all the ways that we can partner and showcase them throughout our experience, including education.
Yeah, I think Raquel, you hit on something really that touched for me there, was around community. How are you building that community and that loyalty through these experiences to try and bring people back? And kind of how are you thinking about the content that will facilitate that returning community?
Well, I'll jump in. We're constantly testing ways to integrate community into our experiences, and then vice versa. We work really hard to develop like a sense of closeness and safety and energy, because the education that we're delivering is a pretty heavy topic. Not a lot of entertainment when we're talking about like sustainability and things like that. So we do things like cap registration for intimacy around particularly sensitive topics, and just, iterate instead of trying to get everyone into the same room at once. We try to integrate our community values into like how we introduce and even structure events with outside facilitators. And we work really hard to vet those folks and ensure that they're familiar with what we expect around community values. And then we invest in dedicated community managers to do things like chase down follow-ups and introductions. Any type of engagement we see during an event, we work really hard to extend the life of that, and thus like expand the community aspect of it.
So I can chime in a little bit as well about community and how we're trying to build community. We're leveraging our social channels, and we have a brand tagline, make more, gather often. So obviously in the last year, it's been about virtual gatherings, and we have found people come and take classes and then get on their own Zoom with their own family and do a virtual gathering afterwards. But we really leaned into this idea of make more. Every day making food is this act of love and kindness. And so we tie it back to the themes. So the themes of what people are cooking in a certain time frame, obviously as food is seasonal, if you're leaning into vegetables and things, it's what's happening at the market. And we run a weekly make more content slot on Instagram, and we ask folks to share what they're making, and we have a theme that week. And so we can tie it back to the classes that we're cooking, but it really sort of is an additional layer that adds on. And when people share with us using our Make More hashtag, we then reshare our favorite content, and we just kind of build this community around food and this idea, which is central. It's, it's our brand proposition about sharing happiness through making and sharing good food. And so we just keep trying to create those connections through this idea of cooking and coming to us and sharing what you're cooking and connecting that way.
Yeah, we're doing something similar that you mentioned with the social piece, and I think of fine art is a really good example of that is a close community too. And I think playing into I think we have planner communities out there that are in social media groups, and rallying around how can we better support them. So because it's easy to lump everybody together and say we're all craft, this is a craft community or an art community, but we find that, I guess, kind of like Raquel, you're talking about, really bringing that group in a little bit smaller. And we've done something like that around these groups that are very passionate about something that's very specific, and just being able to provide them a unique forum and let them have, the space to be, I don't know, as an artist, I think of like my crazy artist place. And I think that's true for them. I think it's a safe place for them to come and kind of nerd out on whatever it is that they're doing. And that's been a really, really big, cool piece of what we've been able to accomplish with the online that we weren't really able to accomplish in this kind of magnitude with the in-class stores, because, we had that kind of, niche group, but it was very small and it wasn't really connected between stores. And now we've been able to take basically a nation full of people and pull them together and let them, have these experiences together. And we've had a lot of really good learnings from that I think will be able to support them better in the future, and capturing that feedback, in unique ways based on their group, because they talk to each other differently too. So.
Absolutely. And Jen, I know you're talking a lot about learning and just the diversity of audiences that you have for these experiences. How are you sort of learning and figuring out what's working and what's not? And for different segments, maybe what experiences are resonating with them that you can repeat? What are you sort of using to test and learn?
So we do a lot of looking at data, and not that data tells you everything, but it could be customer feedback data. It could be their actual words saying, this worked amazingly, or, oh my gosh, this was awkward, and, we wish that you would do it differently, or have you thought about this or that? And one of those pieces of feedback that we got just in masses was they wanted more, I guess, high level classes on certain pieces like tech. So we launched a paid tech class. So this is a tech class that, really focuses in on certain skills, and it is a longer class. It's a much smaller group. So instead of having, thousands of people, it's 50 people, and they can all turn their cameras on, and they can talk to each other, and they can talk to the teacher, and it becomes more like that class feel that you would get from an in-store class. So, and I guess it's just constantly paying attention to what you're getting back. I think if you begin to get comfortable in, okay, we know what this maker wants, like that's where you stand to lose, right? You have to continuously listen and ask those questions, even if you've already asked those questions. Because if you don't ask those questions, they're going to follow another trend. They're going to take a pivot, and you're going to miss them, So it's just, it's really like almost like an obsessive following of what they're telling you and what the data is saying.
I'm going to add something here, because I agree with you. It's looking at your data and listening to your customers and really understanding what they want. And I think that leads on to my point of truly understanding the value that your experience provides, be it in person or online. And if you're taking learnings from one channel into the other, figuring out how to make it work. So by this, the example that I'm going to give is when people come to a cooking class at Solar Top in person, part of the value is it's a small group experience as well, but you're working with a chef. and the chef is showing you things like they're going to show you some basic knife skills, and they're going to teach you a great way maybe to chop an onion that's safe, and there's sort of the basic principles, right? So when you pivot to an online class, the challenge was, how do we make this happen? And obviously the online classes, there are more people. How do we still keep that intimacy and those special moments of really interacting and feeling like you're being enriched and learning something and walking away with something really valuable? So we did a few things. The one is using a 2-camera system. So there's a far camera where the chef speaks to you and you feel like you're part of the classroom, but then they have a close-up camera of their cutting board. So when they're doing those teaching moments and the fine skills, they can zoom in. And so you really feel like you're there with the chef and getting that one-on-one instruction. And then the other thing is taking moments to pause and survey the class and make sure that no one has a question about bar. So it's ingredients for cooking, right? So something as mundane as noodles, say, doing a pad thai class, maybe there's so many different types of noodles, and making sure that you're looking and tracking and giving everyone the correct instructions on how to prep their noodles. So there's definitely things that you have to learn about each channel and refine and keep working so that you are maximizing the experience and making sure that your attendees are walking away fully enriched, no matter whether they're in person or online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm curious to know, from Raquel, what's your stance on how you really measure the effectiveness of what was working and what wasn't, pivoting from this in-person to online community?
Oh, it's so completely different, the metrics that we look at now. I'll just add too, when Natalie was talking about pinpointing the value that your experience provides, I think one thing the metrics really help you do is understand what needs to be modified and what needs to be additive. So it's such a rich place to learn what to create additional experience for versus how to modify existing experience to, deliver the value promised. And we look at engagement percentage with each of our products, like what percentage of our membership is actually digging in to each different product. In the instance of working, B2C facing, it's just registration rates and what percentage of folks are returning and things like that. It's very similar for me. We also are looking at NPS, of course, like how are people, how excited are people about us versus how neutral are they? We also look at passive actions like opens and forwards of our newsletter, where we provide a lot of our value and promote our experiences. And then we look at things that build like loyalty and build brand awareness. We offer guest passes to some of our experience, for instance. So we'll look at what percentage of our membership is using the guest passes. A lot of this comes down also to discoverability. Like when you're pivoting into a new type of experience, you're teaching people how to use a site. You're teaching people how to register with you. There's so many different processes that you have to kind of streamline, make efficient, and give people time to adapt and adopt. And those metrics, it's so funny, sometimes seeing them fluctuate is just as simple as, I created a new explainer GIF, so now people know how to use this, and wow, look at those engagement rates skyrocket. So it's also understanding what is operational versus what is the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting, based on some of the questions that we've gotten in the chat, I want to double click on something Raquel and Natalie, I think you both mentioned, which was assigning this value to classes. And someone in the audience wants to know, how do you assign value to classes when you're talking within your business context? Is that CLTV? Is this NPS inputs? What have you seen really resonating within your organizations?
So I think
Go ahead, Natalie.
Just real quick. It's a mix. I think it definitely is. So there's the pure value of the class itself. So is that actual class resonating? And you look at things like fill rates, how many people are buying this class and the attendance. I think there's the post scores as well, when you serve your post surveys, intent to take another class, NPS. And I think that you kind of have to look at it across the funnel and look at your different metrics. And it's a combination. It's not just one thing. And then the other thing is, I would say, you need to take your learnings as well and keep tweaking your offerings and keep measuring and keep tracking and keep a record and understand the changes you've made and how that's impacting the business and bringing people back. Yeah.
So for us, it's it's a little different because our classes are free for the most part. We have some paid classes, but when you're talking about a free class, it can be difficult because you can't measure, dollars sold of classes. So we look at things like, product purchases as well. But a really, really big piece is just, I think the NPS in combination with the customer, the value to the customer. So is this increasing, purchase? Is it, giving you that stickiness? Is your customer coming back more frequently? So I think there's a lot of upside to the classes. And so in every way possible, we tie the classes into how it's important to the overall business. And again, especially important because our classes are largely free. So, there isn't that immediate satisfaction of a ticket sold.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then go ahead, Raquel.
Oh, sorry, Lauren. I was just going to say I really relate to Jen there because we have a single annual membership fee. We don't have as much positive feedback in the form of fill rates or ticket sales. And I'm learning a lot from both of you, but I would say one way that we do look at value as a newer organization is very qualitative. We do a lot of direct interviewing and surveying right now, getting chunks of folks' time to get feedback across multiple services. And in a membership model, people are very vocal. They do not hesitate to tell you, like, this is useless for me. I'm very busy. This is what I like. And I really appreciate that. And it's so rewarding when we get that, you got it right. And now I can dedicate 4 more hours with you. One thing that we do look at, I should add, is how much time are you going to spend with us a month? There's a lot of options for how our particular membership is going to spend their time as executives. Hearing that someone go from 2 hours to 4 hours, that's a huge win for us.
And I just want to add one more thing, because Raquel, you made me think about this. I think providing an easy way for your customers to actually provide input. So we have a tool on our site that can collect input. If you come to our website, that's just one of the many ways. And I think it's really important because very frequently we get these messages from customers who've had just an incredible experience with the chef. And it helps us not only understand, the class format, the class type, that we've got a really happy customer, but it also helps us understand the quality of our instructors, because that's another part of the puzzle, right? The people you have teaching and interacting, and understanding the folks who really, resonate and the types of classes that they teach well. So I think, making sure that there's an easy way to provide input, and then thinking about the other side of the coin as well, the people you've got running the experiences, and how to also train and enrich them so they can get better at what they're doing. And if there are areas where they excel in, helping them lean into those areas and making it successful across both parts.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that education also has to be educating and developing the person who is facilitating that experience, because they're really the face of your company and the face of that guest interaction with your brand. And kind of on that note, I want to talk about, specific things that you've seen that were really successful, whether that's a specific class or a specific educational experience that you feel like that was really, it knocked it out of the park. Everyone was giving us accolades. Every guest, really resonated with this. This is actually a question from the audience to know what specific experiences have had the most engagement and participation. So I'd love to hear any wins and successes that you could share.
So I'm, go for it, Jen.
I'll go ahead. We saw an incredible amount of support and heart for any kind of classes that really helped people looking at growing or starting their small business. So if they're, and I think a lot of that had to do with, the situation we were all in 2020, and just, people, the uncertainty, and people looking for other things to do to earn money. And we lucked out because we also had very good presenters and teachers. But just, I think that was a really big, wow for us, was to see just the excitement around that particular topic.
Yeah, I was going to highlight 2 things for us. And the common theme, and it's something you just said, is it was in response to the situation people found themselves in last year. And I think that's so key as well. You're not operating this in a vacuum. You have to think about your experiences within the context of the folks who are coming to you in their lives and what's happening to them. So the one was a free thing around Thanksgiving, and we did it through Instagram stories and Facebook, and it was a couple of live sessions and a few pre-recorded videos that handled the basics of Thanksgiving prep, because for the first time, a lot of people were doing it by themselves. It was a different Thanksgiving. It was smaller. It was this completely, it wasn't just make your usual mashed potatoes and go to your big gathering and everyone's bringing their favorite dish. You had to do everything. And so we just created this series of content about how to pull off an easy, basic, simple Thanksgiving. And it just saw such great engagement. And so that, because it wasn't paid, we were measuring engagements and views, those sort of things, and did super well. And it was free. And then the other part on the paid side, we realized again, people don't have the luxury during the busy week. They're on Zoom all the time. This idea of like taking a 2-hour cooking class and making dinner, it's not something you're going to do every day. So we came up with this idea of sort of a prep now and eat later. So if you had an hour, you could come and take a class and maybe you make a lasagna. And we were running it in store as well because we had restrictions. Folks couldn't take their masks off and sit and eat, and with smaller class sizes. So you couldn't do the normal come and cook a meal and then share it communally. So the idea was, let's make a dish and then take it home, and you have it for later, and you take it home in a container that you can reheat it in with reheating instructions. Same with online. And so you can get away from it all, have this moment of relaxation, get away from the stress, take a cooking class, but dinner's also done for later. And again, that was done within the context of people's lives and what they really needed. And so at that time and place did super well because it was in response to a real need.
You're really bringing back those moments last year when we were all adjusting, y'all. And I have to say, everything you tapped into, we also found success with at Kindred: timeliness, support and emotion, and also just kind of making an experience out of something that generally people grapple with alone, like dinner prep. At Kindred, one thing that was really successful for us was providing a very timely response. After the January 6th insurrection, we immediately were in folks' inbox with the contributor that we had worked with resources for how to talk to your leadership, how to talk to your employees, how to take care of yourself, and also just, how to speak about giving language to what was going on at the Capitol on January 6th. Now, this was something that everyone needed, no matter how they felt about the events, because they didn't know how people around them felt about the events, and they needed some support to navigate the issue. And something that we learned over the summer and into the fall and resulted in some great success was the emotional piece. So, and grappling with tough issues in more intimate groups. So we ran events around like navigating conversations about race. So kind of moving out of that operational, like here's how you implement a DE&I strategy, and into the interpersonal, in order to have the language to even engage in that operational piece and to really gain some confidence in talking about those things and navigating those things. Yeah, you're bringing back 2020 for me. That was awesome.
But as we think about 2021, and as we think about meeting people really where they are, we had a question that I think is perfect for this, which is, how do you address Zoom fatigue? Everyone has been going to these online experiences. How do you keep it fresh for people who've been, as Natalie said, in Zoom meetings, start of day to end of day? How do you, keep it fresh to really maximize attendance in this all virtual experience world?
Yeah, we're seeing that. We've been seeing that, actually. Like, you can, we felt it when kids went back to school. We saw a change in how they were interacting. What's funny is, the live views went down, but our post views for the recordings went up like exponentially. So, they were kind of seeing it, on their terms. And it's hard because school gets out at a certain time, and you can't have the class at 8 o'clock at night, so you get all the time zones because then you've got kids in bed. So it was a really unique challenge with the kids. But I think one of the things that we've tried to do is continue to build on the quality of the content, as well as the actual content itself. Like, so instead of really having a wide base of variety, which we kind of already have, it's really what areas are our customer asking us to go deeper in. So, you know, I think certain avenues you can only go so deep in, but others you could spend the rest of your life learning. And those are the ones that we're really trying to map out right now, is how can we, you know, and part of that plays into our paid experiences. How do you build that piece out to give people value so that it's not just me watching a free Zoom class and for entertainment because I can't go out, because people are going out. And I think part of it for us will be reopening the experiences in the store. But I do think that there will be people that aren't close to a store or don't want to go in a store that will continue to leverage the online piece. And for them, we have got to find a way to continue to build depth to what we're offering them so that they do make time for it, you know, put it in their schedule and actually pay to come and see you in these virtual events.
Yeah, I would echo that. So we're definitely returning to in-person experiences and seeing more people. I think pent-up demand, everyone wants to get out and do something. And so there are definitely more people coming to experience it in store. But as you said, Jen, there are a lot of people who don't live near a store and can't come into a store. And with the realities of changing schedule and Zoom fatigue, I think it's about looking at your content really critically and looking at things like the length of your offering, the type of offering, building structured content. Maybe it's a series of classes where you can go deeper on a topic. So thinking about your content in a way where you take the Zoom fatigue into reality, maybe making shorter bite-sized chunks and just structuring it differently so that it still adds value and people will carve out the time and come to you and pay to take the experience because they are enriched and it's something they're interested in and it's something they want to do.
Yeah. I would echo what Jen is saying and Natalie's saying about depth. For our coaching experiences, for instance, those have a set term. You know, folks are going to sign up for 6-8 months and they're going to meet on the same day each month. So there's like a cadence to it that does help with the engagement. And we also really work hard to diversify our facilitation approaches. So we've got different event types so that folks know what they're getting into before they get there. And there's levels of interaction. So you can kind of choose where you want to be. Sometimes a more passive watch is better for your Zoom time. You just want to lay back with your tea. You know, we'll play music during our sessions, as you know, when there's thinking time, things like that. But sometimes you want to put pen to paper. You want to have something tangible that comes out of that time you spent on Zoom. We also are experimenting with a lot of different formats, especially around audio. You know, what can I just put into my headphones and really take away that's going to help me do my job better right now? And we'll look at more bite size as well. And then, of course, there is the move to hybrid.
Yeah, I'm so interested to dig into this topic of reopening and hybrid and going back in person. I know that you've all kind of touched on what the future looks like, but as we kicked off the conversation with talking about current trends, I'd love to hear where you think we're going in terms of future trends for reopening and what experiences look like post-vaccine.
I love how nobody's rushing to answer that one. You know, I think we can all wager a guess, and I think, at least I speak for me, we have plans and ideas, and I think it's given me a renewed sense of intent and deliberateness with the in-store events, like having this beautiful, you know, orchestra of all the content types now. It's not going to be like it is before. It'll never be like it is before, which is great. You know, this last year has allowed us to make amazing discoveries in what we can do and about our customer. And, you know, to circle back to what I said before about people not located by the store, we have expanded our customer base and in content viewership well outside of the reaches of our stores. So we can't turn that off, and we can't even switch what we're offering and move that in stores. It really does have to be collaborative. And I think that's going to be the key, right? Is how can you continue to give this this dualistic content to both your in-store crowd and your online crowd. Some of them will mix. Some of them will watch you online and they'll come in your stores, but a lot of them will only come into the stores, and then you have some that will only view you online. So for us, it's, also, can we bring our online content into the stores? I think there's a lot that we are going to be able to test when it comes to opening back up. And I'm very excited about getting to kind of reimagine it in this world of having a beautiful surround sound of online content.
Yeah, I would say that we're certainly looking at ways to not duplicate, but make things additive and adaptive. So working with contributors to deliver in person, and then create something that isn't an exact reflection, but is made for the online environment. We're looking at longer term self-directed courses for sure. But I would say, one thing post-COVID that I'm really excited about is making sure that we continue to design for accessibility. This move to being online, and I mean accessibility for people who need accommodations. I also mean accessibility as in like just access to this type of like level of programming, and you don't have to live in a certain place. That's been really exciting for me and for our membership and the diversity of it. So sure, we'll do in-person events, but there's a lot of barriers between someone's front door and a venue. And I really want to make sure that our online experiences are as rich and as accessible as any in-person experiences that we begin to plan. That said, a lot of question marks, a lot of exploration, not a lot of certainty at this point about what we would transition into in person.
Yeah, and I think for us, it's a little bit of everything that both Jen and Raquel have said. It's about meeting the customer where they are and then serving experiences that suit the medium. So does that mean that online becomes slightly shorter format because of the reasons we discussed, Zoom fatigue, or you just may do an online because it's a quicker experience versus in-store that might be slightly longer because it's more immersive. I think there are lots of things to explore and to test, but I think ultimately it comes down to understanding, like I said, the value that you provide for your customer and why people are coming to you for the experience, and then optimizing it for the channel. And then I think, short term, there probably will be a big explosion to people wanting to come into stores. Like I said, they're being cooped up in their homes. They want to get out when they can. But I think in the longer term, things will sort of stabilize, and we're just going to keep testing and figuring out what works. And then I think the other part is, don't set it and forget it. Don't fall asleep at the wheel. Just keep paying attention and keep trying new things and keep juicing up your programs to keep them interesting, whether it is through bringing in new collaborators, new ideas for content, new formats, new ways for people to engage. So those are sort of some of the things that I would say are in the front of my mind as we look towards the future.
Yeah, my biggest fear is what you just said, Natalie. It's like not falling asleep. Don't fall asleep. Don't get comfortable, because I think this year that we're in is going to be different than last year. But I also think the next year will be equally as different, because it's just so much has happened and so much has changed. And I think, now is the time to really keep your eyes wide open and your ear to the ground to understand what the changing need is, because I think maybe the customer doesn't even know what their need is. They're saying it's one thing today and something different tomorrow, and we have to do our very best to be there for them as it changes for them.
Absolutely. I think responding to that change, and honestly, probably being a couple steps ahead of it, is going to be really key for brands that are going to adapt to the world that we're entering in 2021. And I'm curious, what you all are doing now, or what you might recommend someone should do now to start to plan for the unplannable this year, as they're thinking about trying to stay ahead of what the consumer needs are going to be in 2021. So what would you do now, or what are you doing now that you think can help people prepare to reopen?
Yeah, I'm already talking to our partners that we work with right now for virtual experiences about how they plan to support hybrid, what type of experiences are they already supporting, and that's helped connect me to some early adopters. There are people who are already doing hybrid events of different sizes, especially corporate events, like if their workforces are already immunized. So I'm tapping into some unusual networks for the work that we do that are really helping me start to understand the lay of the land. And then as we survey and onboard members into our experience, we're starting to ask, well, we will start, I'm planning that now, to ask questions that will shape what we choose to test and offer, maybe in the fall. It's also helping us think a little bit about density as people do get immunized and are pent up, as Natalie said earlier. How much time is going to shift away from online, at least temporarily, as people kind of revel in their newfound freedom, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think we already are offering in-store again. So we're sort of grappling with it day to day and looking at things like adjusting class sizes, and it's based on local CDC guidelines. It's based on a lot of factors. So that's, I'd say it's everyday monitoring, reviewing, and just trying to make sure that you're keeping pace with the level of vaccinations, with what the latest guidelines are, what's happening with COVID. So it's about monitoring. So I'd say one is just really monitoring the situation. The other is, I think, keeping your teams in that nimble mind state. We all last year had a very quick sort of learning curve in how to reorganize and use tools and work from home. And so we're in the state of nimbleness. So don't lose that, keep that muscle strong. And then the third is just, and you said this, Raquel, keep listening to your customers, find ways to engage with them, listen to them, understand what they want. And like I said earlier, meet them where they are. And I think those are sort of three basic things that if you're doing that now, it helps set you up to ride out the next year, 2 years.
Yeah, we're looking at, how we want to bring the experiences back in store. And, I already kind of talked about being deliberate about it, but I think, the other piece is really making it make sense for the customer, which kind of goes back to listening to the customer and anticipating what the customer is going to need. So yeah, we, like Raquel, we're already, we're not back in like Sur la Table yet, but we are having those conversations and mapping out what that looks like, so that it is the right thing, not putting anyone at risk or making people feel uncomfortable. We want to do it, but do it in a way that makes the customer feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a good place to probably start to wrap up before we go into our final Q&A, because I do want to close out with some advice, any advice that you have for brand leaders in the audience who are trying to create educational experiences to create loyalty. What advice would you have for them as they try and think through some of the topics we've talked about today?
I can kick it off. I would say some of it is summarizing what we talked about. It's really understanding your brand and your brand proposition and your brand value and what customers come to you for. And so when you understand that why, you can then craft experiences, be they educational, be they entertaining, that gives the customer something engaging and unique and special and a reason to come to your brand and experience the brand and walk away with even more brand love. And then I'd say just start testing things, and you don't have to think big, you don't have to think like a Zoom class or something. I talked about it earlier, how we used Instagram stories and Instagram lives. You can start small, you can try things in social, and there are so many tools nowadays to do live one-on-one experiences through Facebooks and Instagrams. Test those, try those, get a following, find out formats that work. So I'd say just understand what it is and then figure out a way to get it going and keep testing it, and then just keep scaling and growing. And you don't have to rush into something huge. You can start small and grow from there.
Yeah, I would agree with that mindset of testing. I would say one of our biggest accomplishments was not waiting for perfection. We just went and said, and for us, it wasn't building, it wasn't like one day we said, what does our customer need? Our customer needs classes. We had classes and we had to close the classes. So for us, it was more of a panic of, how do we continue to support these customers who are used to having our classes? And so instead of worrying about, putting together a perfect program for online the way we had in store, it was just, what can we do? What's something we can quickly do? And we went and had amazing partners, our vendor partners. We had internal talent that was teaching, and it was scrappy, I think would be a good word for it. It was scrappy. And we planned a month and we did 4 classes a week for a month. And then we added more classes, and now it's crazy. And it just feels weird that it was less than a year ago that we were doing that, because it feels like we've been doing this for a very long time. But I think don't burden yourself with perfection or, having the plan all ironed out. It really wouldn't have worked for us if we hadn't been nimble.
Yeah, Jen, you mentioned your wonderful partners. I really feel like the right partners and collaborators are so key. And that doesn't necessarily mean external. It can be internal as well, or customer partners. And so once you can articulate your why, to Natalie's point, you should be articulating that over and over again to your partners and collaborators. You should be checking your partner references. I think a lot of people got off the blocks really hot at the beginning and made some poor investments around partners and things like that. So it's important. I think it's important to hire diversely, ensure that your community is represented in your vendors, because it will show in how your experiences are developed and marketed. You want to check value alignment with those partners and look for opportunities to give your team the creative reins to deliver really engaging and authentic experiences. And then lastly, I would say, kind of like the perfection point, keep it simple, go the level of sophistication that matches your goals. I know a lot of folks who already had virtual experiences, they came with a high production value. And I think people got a little in their heads about what a good experience looks like versus what it feels like, which is more important. And then this stuff is so valuable. I think it's so important to capitalize on content redeployment. So, creating written content, creating audio content, all those different things based on your experiences will just amplify the value across all of your distribution channels. So.
Wonderful advice. I feel like people could come back to that last little bit of this conversation as a little pep talk when they get in that paralysis mode of trying to make it perfect, trying to launch the exact right thing. Just rewind this conversation a few minutes and have that little Natalie on your shoulder or Jen on your shoulder saying, it's going to be fine. Doesn't have to be perfect. I think that's a good reminder for everyone. And just like Raquel said, paying more attention to how that experience feels, how that resonates with the person who's joining is probably far more important than how it looks or the production value. So great end to the conversation and cap of advice. And now I'm reading through some of the great questions that we've gotten from the audience. So I want to start with one that's really focused on ROI. So at what point do you deem an experience as potentially a low ROI experience that you might discontinue? Is that low attendance? Is that just less engagement? At what point have you decided, yeah, that's not working, we're going to stop it?
So I think it's important to have enough information to be able to see that variation, right? So in the beginning, the first several months, we probably weren't really equipped to look at the classes and say, well, that's a bad class, so let's get rid of it. So having almost a year's worth of data and over 700 pieces of unique class content under our belt, we can now look at the array and say, between live sign up, live views, and then post-class views, which ones are really resonating with the audience. And it doesn't even have to be like, if it's a low performer, kill it. It could just be a matter of, perhaps this is not the kind of content that we need to be airing weekly. This is a really small group. It's a, like I use cosplay, for example, like we do cosplay classes and people don't think of Michaels when they think of cosplay. So I think, that's one that we run a little less frequently. And there is a very passionate following. Again, that's one of those groups that, they are very into their craft. And And I don't ever expect that to be what we call a rock star sellout class, but it's very important to our community to offer it. So I think it more than just like have it, don't have it. It's like, how often do you have it, and who do you bring in, and you know, what is the need of the community? And it all goes back to listening to your customer, which I think we've said 1,200 times now. But that's really such a huge piece, is listening to what your customer needs. But I'd say look at the data.
And I'd also add to that, definitely looking at your data and having historical helps, because you have those trend lines. And so you can look at your comps and understand how you're trending and tracking, especially if it's a paid situation. I mean, for free too, but the other part of that too is your cost structure. Really understanding your cost structure, understand what it costs to put on a class, so you can balance the two. And then to Jen's point, when they're niche ideas or niche classes, you know, still keep them in the mix maybe, but make sure that you're running them in a way where you can absorb it maybe with the other more profitable classes. So looking at your class mix in addition to the per class profitability and cost structure.
Great. This is another question from someone in the audience asking if we've found a sweet spot when it comes to the length of classes.
I think it varies. It really varies. I wouldn't say that there's one magic answer. You're going to find probably a few different answers depending on the time of day, the type of class, the audience. So I think you need to understand your audiences, understand your offering, and then go in and test things until you understand your sweet spots for your offerings.
I couldn't have said it any better than Natalie.
I would just add, I agree. We test a lot of different durations. One thing I also test is structure. So how can I segment a course so that someone who can drop in for the first 20 minutes knows what value they're getting versus the last 20 minutes. I also kind of tend to take like Q&A or like extra instructor time on the back of the class so that we can get through a bulk of content, and then people who are really engaged can stay behind and get their questions answered, and making that really clear up front, like, hey, if you're busy, just come for the last 20 minutes, and then targeting our outreach accordingly. Like, I think you would really, if you log in at the half hour, you're going to get a lot of value out of this.
You know, actually, you made me think of something that our chefs do, which is kind of fun. They have to clean the kitchen afterwards on the online classes. So what they do is while they're washing the dishes, they leave the Zoom channel open. And so the folks who have those deeper questions, they encourage them to stay on. And so they can have those one-on-one moments with the chef while they're doing their cleaning, and get their deeper questions answered. So there are fun ways that you can engage people, right? And you can engage the interested people that way. And then the people who came just to cook and eat can go. So think about structure. It's a great point.
That's fantastic. And talk about multitasking, you know, fielding questions, cleaning up the kitchen. That's some real skill. I have another question here about asking if you have any, or if you found any community members that are so knowledgeable that you're actually comfortable with having them teach content on behalf of your brand. So maybe a little bit more about how you leverage the community and actually becoming the educator.
So we have found a little bit of that to be true in ours. And something I didn't mention before was we did some testing with our community members. When we were in store, we had community teachers. And so they taught, you know, it was, you know, we didn't dictate what they taught or when they taught or who taught. It was just our classrooms were available. You know, they scheduled through AnyRoad, and they basically just said, this is a class I'm going to teach, and let people sign up. So we actually leveraged some of those to teach in the beginning. And we have a few that we found that they're not vendor affiliated, you know, they're not Michael's employees, and, you know, they have something amazing to offer. And I'm going to circle this way back to what Raquel said about the, you know, just that sense of giving back and the charitable nature of, you know, the free class. And they were open to saying, yes, I will teach this class for, you know, because we're not charging our customers. So, you know, they're teaching for free, and it's a mutual benefit to both of us. But yes, we've absolutely found some community members that made great teachers and are teaching still.
Fantastic.
I'll just add, we look for opportunities for our members to be able to showcase their skills, excuse me. But we haven't yet tapped into the ability for someone to lead And I think that's partly because we are here in service of our membership. And so where they're very passionate, we look for ways to showcase, look for ways for them to lead on like editorial without necessarily being the instructor. But I think there's a lot of potential there. So I'm certainly not ruling it out. And Jen, you never should have told me. I'm going to try and sign up as Michael's instructor, I'm sure of it.
Do it.
We'll all be at your class, especially if it's in person. We'll be the first ones on. And then we have a question about tying experiences or tying attendance to those experiences with e-commerce transactions. So this is probably more a question for either Natalie or Jen. How do you tie the actual involvement in an experience with either in-store traffic and in-store purchases or e-commerce purchases? Is that something that you're monitoring?
Absolutely, yes. Especially for in-store purchases, a little easier when you come and take a class, you get a discount that you can use that day, and you have the chef right there, and you've been making something and maybe using new tools or ingredients. So it's a very easy sort of next step to go and walk that retail floor and pick up the things you might need and ask the chef the questions, is this the right whatever for me? A little bit harder in the world of e-commerce, obviously, but definitely we still monitor it. And I think in the world of online, there sometimes might be a lag as well, because you might sign up for a class, take a class, try a new dish, and then realize when you see the chef use a tool or something that it might be easier with that tool, so then you come and shop in the post moment. But I think that's important to have, it points to the importance of having really good customer data and be able to tie that together so that you can look in your CDP and see if someone's taken a class and then what is their post-class purchasing behavior.
Yeah, I would say the same. Since we don't have the in-store, that piece doesn't really exist for us right now. It's kind of the same in-store online. It's really about the items themselves and watching, we're very SKU rich. So it's only a small amount of SKUs that are being used on these classes. So it's pretty obvious when the SKUs are selling. So where we can't necessarily say, customer A took this class and bought this item in every case, we can see the patterns, and we absolutely look for those patterns.
Wonderful. Well, that was actually all of the questions from our audience. So I think it is a great place to wrap up. Jen, Raquel, Natalie, thank you so much for our conversation. And I will turn it over to Bianca to close out the meeting. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.